The following is a KIRO 7 Eyewitness News special presentation.
A baby orca, motherless, sickly, and alone, shows up in Seattle's urban waters. Scientists are shocked when they discover she is hundreds of miles from her home range in Canada.
We were just amazed this little northern resident whale could have found her way all the way down into Puget Sound, and why she chose there to sort of stop and make it her home is anybody's guess.
As time goes by, the lonesome whale turns to humans for companionship. But experts believe her only hope for long-term survival is to be reunited with her pod.
This is a first. It has never been done before. This is a very high-risk situation.
In an unprecedented experiment, scientists and two governments work side by side to get an orphaned orca back home.
I think she's a survivor. I think she's probably already a legend in the orca community, you know.
Tonight, meet the lead scientists who identify the lost whale and try to remedy a situation they have never seen before in nature. We'll relive the orca's dramatic capture in Puget Sound and her 300-mile trip back to Canada. And watch the whale's attempts to fit back in with her family after she is finally set free. From rescue to relocation to release, join us now for Springer and Orca's journey home.
These are the spectacular waters off the northern coast of Vancouver Island. This area is the summertime playground for hundreds of whales, including a young orca by the name of A73, or Springer. Who could guess that one day this little whale would make international headlines? But our program tonight begins well before that, and far, far away, some 350 miles from here, in the waters of Seattle.
Mid-January 2002, an unusual visitor turns up in the waters of Puget Sound. It's a young orca, and she is all alone.
In general terms, it's very rare for a young orca to be alone, so this was a pretty unique circumstance.
Whale scientists Paul Spong and John Ford from Canada join U.S. researchers to help solve the mystery. They determined fairly quickly that the calf is about 2 years old and not one of the southern resident orcas that swim Puget Sound.
So it was a little bit of a puzzle there to figure out who this little whale in Puget Sound was. It took a combination of photo identification using natural markings, including the oval white eye patch, and the acoustics.
Besides individual markings, orcas can also be identified by their unique calls, shared only by close family members. When the solitary youngster finally offers up a good voice sample, the recording goes straight to Orca Lab, a remote research station off northern Vancouver Island.
It was such a mystery because she was just this little lone whale.
Helena Simons and Paul Spong have been studying orca acoustics for decades. And when Simons hears the call, she knows immediately who it is.
Oh my goodness. This must be her.
The little orca is A73, or Springer, a northern resident whale given up for dead. It is Springer's distinctive call that clearly identifies her as a member of A Clan, one of several pods that return to northern Vancouver Island every summer.
It was acoustics that, you know, solved the mystery, or at least defined where we should be looking. And it's all based on the idea that the calls are passed on from the mom to the offspring. So the degree of similarity of these calls with her mom clinched it for us.
In a computerized picture called a spectrogram, it's clear that Springer's call is identical to her mother's.
That's Springer. And this is Sutledge, her mother.
Once acoustics point to Springer, scientists officially confirmed the orca's identity using these photos, the last ever taken of A73 with A45, her mother. Canadian researchers are stunned that Springer is still alive. They assumed that both she and her mother had died when neither showed up in the summer of 2001. This video, shot in 2000 after Springer's birth, is the only known footage of the two together.
Just the fact that she survived, that she made that journey, and that she got down into that totally unknown place down there and figured out how to make it herself on her own as a tiny little whale, it's extraordinary.
Somehow, after her mother's death, Springer is separated from her pod and wanders more than 300 miles from home, something that whale researchers have never seen before. So why did this happen?
We'll never know. We've sort of dreamt up all sorts of possible scenarios, and so we sort of hypothesized that A45 might have got ill. Of course, her calf, young calf, would have stayed with her. A45 then died, A73's mother, leaving her on her own. We were just amazed that this little northern resident whale could have found her way all the way down into Puget Sound, and why she chose there to sort of stop and make it her home is anybody's guess.
Springer's isolation is a big concern, but there are others too. Veterinarians determine that she is underweight, has some type of skin disease, and most alarming of all, there's an acetone smell to her breath. This could indicate a serious metabolic disorder.
Some days she looks very lethargic, she's logging on the surface. Other days she seems to be having a great time cavorting around.
The only agency with the authority to help Springer is the National Marine Fisheries Service.
We will intervene when it's clear the animal is not sustaining itself and we need to move forward. The tough part's going to be trying to figure out when that is.
And before taking any action, fisheries wants hard facts. So researchers go out to collect blood and other samples from Springer. The first results don't reveal much.
Bloods look fairly normal overall. I mean, there's some things that are a little high and some things are a little low, but nothing that was caught our attention that was really, really abnormal.
She's a juvenile animal, and she's a very social animal, and now she's looking for that social contact with people and boats and branches and that kind of thing.
And that may be her biggest problem of all. Starved for attention, Springer usually is seen hanging around the Vashon ferry dock. She seems to be especially fond of the ferry called the Evergreen State.
When the Evergreen State's been tied up, you just clap your hands on the end of the boat and she pops her head up just like a little puppy.
And just like a puppy, Springer sometimes darts right out into oncoming traffic. Ferry Captain David Wilson describes a few close calls.
We're careful on our approaches. We make slow and cautious approaches, but she may be submerged and all of a sudden there she is right in front of us.
Over time, people are growing more and more attached to Springer, and she to them. It's getting to the point where either the whale or a human is going to get hurt.
We really don't have the luxury of saying, well, we're just going to let nature take its own course. We have messed with nature in a bad way, and this is an opportunity, if not an obligation, to do something about it.
Springer's story definitely resonates. A local farmer even cuts the whale's name and image into one of his fields. Opinions grow more passionate. Public forums debate. Should she be left alone, returned to Canada, put in an aquarium?
It's going to be heartbreaking if we witness the worst thing happen, which is to see her die. But we would rather bear that heartbreak than know she's enduring it by herself in a concrete tank.
I think they should try to help it instead of just leaving it out here.
Pretty much right now, it's helpless and it's obviously lost from the rest of its family.
We think they should leave the whale alone. I mean, it's fishy out here. There's feed everywhere. I have a cabin right here and I watch it jump every day. Looks like it's happier than a clam. And
I don't see a clear-cut answer here because if it were going to die, I'd say, yeah, capture it and do something. It's better than having it die.
Even if she were magically to be plunked right now into the middle of her family pod, she might not fit in and be once again rejected. So we've got some really tough decisions ahead of us.
Even with no guarantee that Springer's pod will accept her again, John Ford and the other scientists advising fisheries unanimously recommend intervention.
Something had to be done to save this little whale.
4 months after Springer first turns up in Puget Sound, federal officials announce a decision.
The best long-term chance for the health and survival of this whale would be if we moved her from her current circumstances, rehabilitated her, and returned to her natal area, which would be off the northern tip of Vancouver Island.
So nature will not be allowed to take its course here. Springer will be captured, rehabbed, and if well enough, returned to Canada.
We want to emphasize that this is a first. It has never been done before.
Springer's rescue will require the collaboration of 2 governments, support from several environmental groups with differing agendas, and a big chunk of money. But if all goes well, this little orphaned orca will make history.
It is a difficult decision, and as I emphasize, it's a high-risk decision. Nonetheless, we are taking it because we think it's the most responsible thing to do here.
Up next, the first capture of a killer whale in Puget Sound in 3 decades. The capture of a killer whale isn't exactly the kind of thing you see every day. In fact, it has been 30 years since an orca was taken from the waters of Puget Sound, and it's the kind of operation where a whole lot of things can go wrong.
We know from past experience that capturing an orca whale can cause great stress, sometimes leading to death.
That's why the National Marine Fisheries Service will rely on someone with experience to lead its capture team. Jeff Foster of Auburn, Washington.
As you see, this is just going picture perfectly.
Foster has directed dozens of marine mammal rescues and transports, including Keiko's big move from Oregon to Iceland. People all around the world watched back in 1998 as the star of the movie Free Willy was returned to his native waters. Stephen Clausen of Seattle worked closely with Foster in Iceland and will join him again for the Springer project.
Having done this many times with various marine mammals, we're very focused and the whole priority is the well-being of this animal, and everybody's very aware of that and everybody's very focused on that. So I think it's very exciting. I think the animal's going to be in the best hands possible.
The capture team will snare Springer using one of 3 methods. Depending on the young orca's behavior, the rescuers may loop a soft rope around her tail fluke and guide her into a stretcher.
That's probably the quickest and most effective way.
A second option is to lure Springer into a floating pen.
The difficulties with a pen structure is that the tides this time of year are very strong, so we just want to make sure that we don't have any nets collapsing and that we do this as safely as we can for her.
The third and last choice, encircle the orca with a large fishing net.
We can net off an area almost the size of a football field, and then we can purse that net up and gradually bring that in until we can manage her.
All 3 scenarios call for a stretcher, like this one, to lift Springer onto a barge. Jeff, what is going to be the diciest part of this operation?
It's really going to be when we try to slide her into the stretcher. When we have the divers in the water and we have the nets and the lines, there's always that there's always that chance of entanglement with the divers. And again, we don't know how she's going to respond to us when we get in the water and once we have her under some restraints.
After capture, Springer will go directly to this federal research facility on the Kitsap Peninsula, located in Manchester, Washington. She'll be housed temporarily in a net pen, 40 by 40 by 12 feet deep. During the rehab phase here, veterinarians will try to learn more about the orca's health problems.
She's just not thriving very well. She could just be something as basic as high parasite load, or she could have something more that we just don't know right now until we get our hands on her to do a thorough medical and physical exam.
As for expenses, federal officials estimate the initial cost of this rescue mission will be covered by 2 $100,000 Prescott grants. These are government funds set aside exclusively for marine mammal rescues. Also, a half-dozen environmental groups form a rare pact to work together to help fundraise.
The orca is one of those animals that sort of engenders support, and I think it's actually a rallying opportunity. I think there are different agendas out there, but right now the major goal is get this animal back to where she belongs.
And it's not just the money that we're raising, it's also the in-kind. It's the fish, it's the boats, it's the people, it's the veterinarians, it's the animal care staff. A lot of people are doing this in kind, and that takes money off the top.
For example, a local fish farm is donating this boat, crane, and crew to help move Springer, and providing discounted food, too.
I think it's a good cause. I think it's a good team effort, with private companies, government, non-profit organizations, to help bring this whale and save it and bring it back to its pod.
As preparations continue, a date is set for Springer's capture, June 13th, 2002, 6 months after her first appearance in Puget Sound.
The primary capture boat is heading out. We will try to pick her up out there, keep her interest as we move the other boats into the area.
On the day before the rescue, the capture team is out on the water practicing. They call it a wet run.
I think we only want one person working her, so I'll do that for the time being, and we'll just kind of swap off.
The team tows the net pen out into the Sound to try it out, this marking the very first time that Springer will see it. Before long, she shows up.
There she is, right there.
I don't know.
As the dress rehearsal begins, the sound of drums and singing float out over the water. It's a farewell song for Springer.
It's a dangerous thing that they're going to undertake, so having good thoughts and wishes that she makes it back, I think is what everybody's going to be doing.
Through the centuries, Northwest coastal tribes have long revered the killer whale, and they are here today to wish Springer, whom they consider a relative, a safe journey home.
What we're saying is, hey, thanks for your time here, and hey, goodbye, and have a healthy life. Go!
Meanwhile, out on the Sound, the practice is underway. Springer readily approaches the research boat that she has come to know so well.
We just want to make sure that we can get her tailstock up so that we can easily slide the loop around her tail, and then.
For the past week or so, the team has been preparing Springer for capture, getting the Orca used to the look and feel of the soft tail line, draping it over her back as she swims by.
She's really changed a lot in how she interacts with us over the last, just in the last couple days. She's a lot more stable when she's on the side of the boat.
Springer's rewards, her favorite rubbing stick, and lots of massage. Now something new. The rescuers lead the Orca up to the floating pen. Outside the pen's perimeter, more scratching and socializing. Then the team uses Springer's favorite stick to entice her into the floating cage.
Hi, little one. Hi. He knows.
She's only in there for a second, but the drill is still a success. At day's end, Foster says he's ready to try the real thing tomorrow, but adds these words of caution.
It's really not an event, it's a process. So it may take us a few days, and we might get lucky tomorrow.
June 13th, 2002. Capture day finally arrives.
Today we will try to conclude the first phase of the rescue, rehabilitation, and return of Orca A73 by completing the rescue.
At a press briefing on this all-important morning, word of new challenges and concerns.
Yesterday went really, really well. Today is a different day, and the conditions out there are marginal for the net pen. I think that at this point, we're going to have to see how it goes this afternoon, but at this point, we're kind of leaning towards the soft tail line.
And so, it looks like the capture will come down to a man, a whale, and a simple rope.
Jim and I will be the first ones in. Steve Sinelli's probably going to be following us in shortly, and then we'll just try to make this go as fast and as smoothly as we can. Got it? Most of us have done this before.
Anticipation grows as news helicopters buzz overhead, the action being broadcast live around the world. Springer again comes willingly right up to the boat. Jeff Foster tries to snare her tail several times, but she slips away. Then he enlarges the loop. Springer swims through, and Foster cinches it up.
Come on, Jack.
Foster and another team member jump into the water to calm Springer down and to keep her head up. In just moments, a second rescue boat pulls up alongside. This is the most dangerous moment of all, sliding the whale into the stretcher.
Put pressure on her chest. Pack behind you guys. Slack. See if you try to get that. This one here, I need a little slack on this side.
Okay, a little slack.
Okay, there we go. Hold that tight. That's it. Okay. Put a little pressure on it. Try to keep the boats away. Okay, let's hold her here and let's position her.
I'm just going to hold her, and if you can come down and tie her up.
Bradley, call landing craft in. Have them come up with
Springer is now secure in the stretcher. The barge and crane are called over. Chopper 7 pilot Clark Stahl describes the moment from overhead.
This has just been unbelievable to watch. In my 20 years of experience, I don't think I've seen anything that is quite like this.
Everyone holds their breath as the little whale lifts out of the water and soars over to the waiting barge. Jeff Foster rides the sling to help balance Springer's weight.
Okay, everybody on board?
Okay, take me over to the big boat.
The little Orca is lowered onto a thick foam pad. She'll rest there for the short ride to the holding facility in Manchester. That trip will take less than an hour.
She's resting really calmly. We saw some vocalizations earlier when we first put her in the stretcher, but she stopped now and she seems to be riding very well.
With temperatures above 90, Springer is packed in ice and continuously hosed down with cold water. Towels are draped over her back to prevent sunburn.
Well, I stuck here and here on the other side. Good job, Jeff.
You did. You found it.
The veterinarians begin their medical tests immediately, drawing blood and collecting other samples from Springer.
We want to look at things that tell us what her metabolic status is, whether she's fighting any kind of infection or not.
45 minutes after capture, Springer's barge rounds the corner and pulls into Manchester. After a few last-minute medical checks at the dock, the young whale is airborne again, the crane this time swinging her towards the net pen.
Stretch her up.
The rescuers now cover every corner of the pen, watching closely to see how Springer adjusts to her new space.
So this thing has gone, I would say the word flawless comes to mind so far. I hope it continues that way.
Phase 1, the capture, is over.
The operation we described to you this morning happened as planned.
At a press conference afterward, relief that one of the riskiest parts of this mission went so well.
Everything went almost as if the animal knew what to do. It was as atraumatic as it possibly could have been. Not a drop of blood in the collection process, so that was very good. Her condition is a concern. She is not a robust killer whale. We're relieved that we now have her in a pen, but we start worrying about the next step.
The next few weeks are going to be critical for Springer as scientists try to figure out what's wrong with her and if she'll ever be strong enough to go back home.
In her net pen in Manchester, Springer's behavior is about what you'd expect from a 2-year-old. She clowns around a lot and tries to get attention.
I've been watching her quite a bit and seeing lots of play behavior when there's a log inside, even sometimes when there's nothing in there. She's splashing with her tail and rolling on her back. Some of the same behaviors that our biologists saw out in the wild.
As tempting as it might be to play with her, Springer's handlers must keep their distance. If the calf bonds any further with humans, it could threaten her return to the wild. The animal care team stays at arm's length by delivering Springer's fish down a long tube, putting screens around her pen, even taking notes from a hidden blind. 4 remote cameras record the whale's every move.
What's nice about this monitoring system is it's a remote monitoring system, so we can minimize our presence out around the pool side so that she's not getting so accustomed to people being around.
To break up the boredom, Springer is given her favorite stick from time to time, along with some other human-made devices she ignores.
And yet another enrichment device that she cares nothing for.
Days go by. There are more blood draws. Every test, including the ones taken right after capture, are all coming back normal. Springer's biggest problem seems to be intestinal parasites, so whale veterinarian Dr. Pete Schrader gives her some worming medication through a long tube.
It was pretty coincidental. 2 hours after that, she started eating. She's been eating 55 pounds a day ever since. Up until that time, she was eating 5 to 10 pounds, 15 pounds a day.
She nailed that one. It's in her mouth. Now it's gone.
In a month, Springer will gain an incredible 200 pounds.
She's actually starting to get a little belly on her, so she's doing really good.
In captivity, Springer's blotchy skin improves. The acetone breath smell disappears, and repetitive tests prove the young orca has nothing that could be passed on to Canada's wild whales.
Good morning, everyone.
On July 9th, Canadian officials hold a press conference to make this long-awaited announcement.
On behalf of the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, to announce that transportation has been authorized for A73 from her holding facility down in the U.S. to her home range in the Canadian waters of Johnstone Strait.
We screened exhaustively for virtually every pathogen imaginable in killer whales, and she came out perfectly clean. So there's absolutely no question in our mind that as far as can be humanly deduced, there is no reason that she can't go back to Johnstone Strait.
Springer's return north will come almost exactly 1 month after capture. The orphaned orca is strong and restless. It's time to go home. Meanwhile, up on the northern tip of Vancouver Island, they're getting ready for a big homecoming. A net pen for Springer is being assembled in a remote inlet called Dong Chong Bay. This is where the calf will be held until release. Orca researcher Paul Spong is thrilled to see it finally coming together.
Oh, it's really great to see you guys here. Starting to look real.
All the labor and equipment here donated.
Basically, we're just glad to be able to help in any way we can in this instance. Our upper management has decided that this is a valuable thing for us to be doing, so we're here.
The pen is going into waters that are in the very heart of Springer's home territory. Researchers hope that when her relatives swim by, they'll make an acoustic connection.
Our hope is that there's going to be mutual recognition, and that when she goes out, she will meet up with the other whales and join up with them. But we're not certain that will happen.
And no one's certain how long Springer will have to stay here. That will be decided later. At this point, U.S. and Canadian officials are finalizing details of Phase 2, getting Springer up north.
But exactly how to move her, by land, sea, or air? You see, smoothness, speed, and efficiency are all critical when it comes to moving an orca hundreds of miles.
Transport by water appears to be the most practical option, and this Canadian hovercraft is one possibility. But then, this high-speed catamaran is offered for the job. The boat, fuel, and crew, all donated by the Nichols Brothers boat builders of Whidbey Island.
Talked to my grandkids about it, and some of the family, they said, Grandpa, that would be a great idea. So I kind of got a little pressure from the grandkids to do this.
In just a matter of days, this special whale transport box is trucked in, courtesy of Six Flags, Ohio. An extra beefy platform is added to the catamaran's deck to support the heavy orca load.
About 11 tons, counting the tank, the water, and the baby.
No detail, too small.
There's heavy barnacle buildup on the bottom, and it's a jet drive boat, so what we have to do is clean out the intakes.
Everything looks good to go. July 12th, moving day. At sunrise, the media and Springer are waiting in Manchester for the whale's transport boat to arrive. But right after the catamaran leaves Whidbey Island, a big problem turns up. The boat is only able to get up to about half its normal speed. At this rate, Springer's journey north, estimated at about 10 to 12 hours, will take twice that long. Back at the dock, disappointed passengers unload and discover two problems. A crab float got sucked into an engine, and the divers failed to scrape all the barnacles off the hull.
It was pretty caked. They were pretty old barnacles, too.
As Springer's team waits in Manchester, the catamaran's hull is scraped completely clean. Then, sea trials show the boat is back at top speed. But it is too late to move a whale today.
The first thing we're taking into account is the animal's well-being. And it was clear that we didn't want that window getting too narrow where we're putting any risks on the animal.
We don't want to try to be putting her, offloading her into her pen up there in the dark. That's one reason we pushed this whole thing back. We just lost so much time today that we needed to push it back. We also believe we need to leave a cushion. I mean, a problem with the boat's not the only thing that could go haywire.
We didn't make it to the moon the first time either, but we're going to make it tomorrow. Well, now we're ready and ready to fly.
July 13th, moving day, second try. To get an early start, the catamaran docks overnight in Manchester. At dawn, it's ready to receive its precious cargo. The operation begins when crews start pulling up the net around Springer's pen. When the pen is shallowed up, It's much easier for handlers to maneuver a 1,500-pound whale. Then the huge crane swings into position. The team guides Springer over to her stretcher. Some splashes and wiggles here as she goes in. Before the big lift, a few final adjustments. Then the little whale is up and away, soaring high over the catamaran's deck. The crane carefully positions the Orca over her transport box, and down she goes.
Ready to go.
Just after 7 a.m., the catamaran pulls away from Manchester. Springer is finally speeding toward home. CNN beams live pictures of the event all around the globe. The boat's co-captain describes the mood on board.
Well, it's a certain amount of relief that we're underway and finally doing it. That's, I guess that's kind of the general. No, it's very, very positive attitude. The weather's nice, everything looks perfect.
At the very breezy back end of the boat, the animal care team keeps constant vigil. They'll be watching Springer for the entire 10-hour journey north.
We're monitoring her respirations. We basically count her breaths for a 5-minute period, about every 15 minutes. Just make sure they're staying regular and constant. We've taken her temperature a few different times, and just making sure that she's comfortable and resting well in her sling.
Fresh, cold water is being pumped into Springer's box from outside, and that, along with some ice, is keeping her cool. But a few hours into the ride, a gauge indicates a problem.
And the water actually is warmer than we had expected, so we're having to add a lot more ice to keep her nice and comfortable at the temperature she likes. And the nice part is we're going into Campbell River right now and get another 100 bags of ice, which should do us just fine.
Even though this stop at Campbell River isn't planned, a crowd is already waiting at the dock.
Hey, Campbell River!
In a flash, another 100 bags of ice are loaded onto the catamaran.
Right here.
Boat owner, crew, and passengers pitch in to help.
I'm just hoping somebody's counting.
Before long, the whole show is back on the road again. Canadian officials escorting Springer along the way.
Going great, the boat's running good, the whale's riding nicely, so we're having a great time.
At around 5 in the evening, the catamaran comes down the final stretch toward Hansen Island, thrilling the motley flotilla waiting to greet Springer. Orca researcher Paul Spong and his daughter are there too.
Well, it was a fabulous sight to see that boat coming up Johnson Strait. We were watching it through a spotting scope and getting bigger and bigger. We could actually see the box on the back of the boat as it went by, and it was a great feeling to see her home.
Coming up next, Springer touches down in her native waters. Just how long will she be captive here?
On a clear summer evening, a high-speed catamaran delivers a lost orca back to her native waters. The trip from the Seattle area to northern Vancouver Island, about 10 hours. In Canada, quite a welcoming committee on hand, from bald eagles to boats of every size and shape, even native tribes.
And when Springer arrived, they were there to greet her with their sailboats and their canoes, and people in their traditional costumes, and a spirit that came from the First Nations people here that I think lent an aura to the occasion that was really profound.
Also in the crowd, Canada's renowned whale researchers, Graham Ellis and John Ford.
I couldn't believe the scene, all the boats and the excitement, and the First Nations dug out canoes out, and it was tremendously exciting.
After months of wandering around all alone, 4 weeks in captivity, and a day's delay getting here, the little orphan is finally back where she belongs.
Realizing that this little whale was coming back sort of home, if you like, it was a gratifying thing, but at the same time, being responsible for basically giving the okay to let her go, I certainly had some trepidation that, you know, okay, it's sort of our problem now.
This final leg, moving Springer to her new holding pen, will be a fairly quick one. A landing craft, or barge, will ferry the calf from the catamaran to her pen, just a few hundred yards away. This moment is a long time coming for many Canadians. The crowd seems genuinely moved when they get their first good look at Springer. As the barge pulls away, the rescue team gives a parting salute to the catamaran's owner and crew.
Thanks, guys.
Now Springer draws close to her pen, just one more short flight before she makes her final landing. An observer at the net pen provides a play-by-play description on a two-way radio.
Other divers in the pool now. They're beginning to swing the crane over the pool. Springer is very calm, very quiet. There are now 5 divers and 6 divers in the pool. Now they're starting to underneath. She's swimming. She just shook her dorsal fin. And,
Springer, at long last, back home.
Into the water. That's terrific. That went fantastic. It's just wonderful.
Dynamite. Never was really convinced I'd see this happen, where she'd actually get back up here, you know?
It went smooth as silk. I can't imagine anything that could have gone more smoothly.
We ask our Creator to watch over her, and also we ask that the family accepts her when they arrive. Thank you.
In mere moments, Springer starts showing off again.
Look at this. Just acting like she's been here all her life.
She was swimming around really quickly, slapping her tail, doing spy hops. It was just outstanding. I've very rarely seen whales respond so well to a transport. She did exceptionally well.
So to actually see it happen, and to see her respond so wonderfully when she, when she was dropped in the pen, yeah, it was. I don't think there was a dry eye on the net pen. This is not very scientific, but I think she knows she's home.
As it turns out, Springer's timing is nearly perfect, her family members having arrived back in these waters the day before.
That was one of the really interesting little bits of timing, because the A-24s, who are her NATO group, showed up on the 12th, which was the day she's supposed to come here.
Fortunately, her pod has turned up in the last few days, and indeed was just a few kilometers away from her current location earlier today. And there's so many variables that we're working with that it's hard to predict when this release might take place. It's going to depend on the time of day, the tide, the weather forecast, and the kind of interaction that we're witnessing between A-73 and her group that will determine when the net will be let down.
It is now the morning after Springer's arrival back in Canada. Veterinarians announce she is in great shape.
From a veterinary medical point of view, there's nothing in her behavior or anything that I've examined on her to preclude release. So from a medical point of view, she's ready to go.
But even more exciting, overnight, orcas swim by the pen. Their calls identify them as the A-11 and A-24 pods, Springer's family, including her grandmother.
She became very excited, very animated, began to breach, to call very loudly, and to orient on the end of the pen facing out towards the open water. And she was obviously hearing the whales going by. Her calls were so loud they practically blew our headphones off.
This is Orca Lab's actual hydrophone recording of Springer calling out to her pod.
If the pod comes back during daylight hours and the same sorts of things happen as did last night, then she could probably go at any time.
After last night's exchange, scientists feel certain now that Springer will not hesitate to go. In her pen, the youngster is restless, looking out toward open water, pushing at the net, calling out. The big question now is, when will her relatives, the A-24 and A-11 pods, be back?
We're all very optimistic that a release could take place in the next couple of days, but I wouldn't say a couple of hours necessarily.
But only about an hour later, Springer's relatives are spotted just a few miles away, and they're heading toward the pen.
Both the A-11s and the A-24s, from where we saw them, have come around and are headed down Blackfish Sound. So if there's a repeat performance of last night and they come by and she can hear them, she's gone.
Now everything shifts into high gear. A float plane swoops down to deliver Springer's tracking tags. They'll need to be attached before the little orca can go free.
This is one of the tags. It's just a suction cup tag.
Out on the water, the scientists radio in. The whales are coming closer. Springer's grandmother isn't among them, but these are still her closest relatives.
We were, of course, discussing amongst ourselves constantly whether, well, what if they go into the bay? What if they, approach the pen? Why wouldn't we let her go?
Divers suit up at the pen. The net is pulled up shallow. Despite all the excitement, Springer just calmly munches a snack.
That's all going to go pretty relaxed.
Under enormous pressure, Springer's handlers manage to get all 3 tags stuck onto her back.
The tags are on, all 3.
It's not a moment too soon.
They're right around the rock. Look closer now.
Just to the right of the rock, and look at right here.
Jeff, they're actually coming closer.
The big male is coming right towards us.
Almost as if scripted, Springer's relatives line up outside the bay waiting. Springer calls out.
All the ingredients were there, and everybody seemed to be in agreement, so we said, let's let her out.
Drop the net, open it up. It's being done now.
Got her over. Ready? Push her under.
Nose, go ahead.
We're off.
Yes! Sweetie, go! Woo!
That must feel good, eh?
Well, let's
How
see.
long's that been?
It's been a month. Month and a day. That's excellent.
Yes, a month and a day since her capture and less than 24 hours home. Springer is free.
Still to come, the ups and downs of life back in the wild.
We're off. Go on.
Just 21 hours after arriving back home, Springer is released into her native Canadian waters. It's a Free Willy moment you just can't see enough.
It was pretty much a euphoria. I mean, the second day we're up here, it was just about as good as it could possibly be.
I'd like to know what my heart rate was.
But A73, or Springer's first encounter with family, isn't exactly a Hollywood moment.
A73 swam straight out as soon as the net was released, headed straight for the whales, and swam up to within about 100 yards of them. The group of whales in the pod milled around, and as they moved out of the bay, A73 stopped and played with a piece of kelp and played with a stick. And then she actually slowly moved off to the west. The other male whales slightly moved off to the east.
Of course, we all would have liked her to swim right up to the pod and mingle in a great greeting ceremony, and that would probably be just a fairy tale kind of ending, you know. These are complex social animals. We don't really understand their dynamics. It might take a while before they come to accept her.
Springer spends her first few hours of freedom all alone. But later that same day, she tries tagging along with a group of orcas.
She's apparently within about a kilometer of her pod, and last I heard she was moving along sort of slowly behind them.
But then Springer resorts to some of her same old habits.
She, over the next few hours, started approaching boats and wanting to rub and interact with them, and we thought, this is not what we wanted to see.
The day after Springer's release, the same team that captured, rehabbed, and transported her goes out to track the little whale down. They know that 2 of the 3 radio tags are still attached.
We have great conditions today for tracking. It's glass calm, so we can see her from a distance. So what we want to do is be as far away from her as we possibly can and monitor her from afar.
At twilight, a pod of orcas cruises by, and the tracking team picks up Springer's signal nearby.
She's up. Yeah, she's just she sounds like she's right in here.
Although it's too dark now to see her, the hydrophone confirms that Springer is out there with other killer whales, her call echoing among theirs.
It's getting kind of late at night, so it's hard to actually get a visual on her, but she's definitely out here. She's in very close proximity with the other whales. The tag's still on. We know both tags are working, so she'll be able to find her first thing in the morning.
The following morning, 2 days now after Springer's release, the tracking team gets an early start. On a foggy morning like this, Springer would be virtually impossible to find without those radio tags.
Is that chirp? Huh? Did you get a chirp?
Nope. Nothing yet.
The tag chirps every time Springer's back breaks the surface, the signal picked up by our radio antenna. Off in the distance, Springer is finally spotted. up close to the shoreline. There's only one tag left on now, and the team that's come to know this little orca so well is disappointed to see her all alone.
Here she is.
But even more disheartening, Springer comes up alongside the boat looking for attention. When she doesn't get it, she heads for another boat.
I was wondering if we could ask you to move a little bit out of the area. This is Springer, and we want to try to give her every chance we can.
I've got the feeling that what we're observing is her starting to make choices. She's still interested in the motorboats, no doubt about it, but she's also appears to be potentially as interested in her other like animals. I'm giving her some time, and I think that's the prudent thing to do.
After several days, all of Springer's tags fall off, as they're designed to do. But a network of Canadian whale watchers are in place to begin tracking her whereabouts visually from several observation points.
Paul Spong is one of the scientists following Springer. Using scopes and hydrophones, he tracks her movements as she struggles to find her way back into the wild.
Certainly, the boat behavior was a problem, and I was very impressed by how quickly she got through it. But it was ultimately the whales that did it for her.
She ended up by fairly quickly bonding with A51, this young whale from A5 pod. And A51 herself is a bit of an orphan. She lost her mother when she was about 8, I believe, 7 or 8.
It was very clear that A51 was taking very direct measures to keep Springer from approaching boats. We know she did it on at least a couple of occasions that were witnessed, and probably others.
Brian Faulkner is one of those people who witnessed A51 protecting Springer. He saw the older orca roughly shove the calf away from his whale-watching boat.
Just as it was getting close to the boat, just lifted her right out of the water with her head and just got between her and the boat and gave her a flip back away from the boat. And everyone on board the boat was just thrilled. Oh, wow, look at that, did you see that? And said, yeah, that was a spanking.
For the rest of the summer, Springer stays away from boats. And scientists say this video is evidence that the unprecedented experiment to reintegrate an orphaned orca with her family is working.
You know, she's right in among them. And whenever we see her, she looks comfortable, she looks functional.
It's mostly good news, but there is still concern that Springer has not completely bonded with just one surrogate mother.
She's bounced back and forth, it seems, between her own pod with one female A56 and this other female A51 in A5 pod. It could be that if either of these surrogate mothers have a calf of their own, they may be less receptive to having A73 around.
Our feeling about her is that regardless of who she ends up with, she's not going to let them go. You know, she's not going to allow them to disappear from her, as must have happened when she got lost last year.
There is one more big test that Springer must pass before her reintroduction can be considered a complete success. You'll find out what that is up next. Springer is now back among the northern residents, a community of whales here in Canada whose numbers continue to fluctuate. Right now, somewhere around 200 individuals.
They've dropped from a peak 4 years ago of around 215 to 16. So their numbers have dropped slightly, and we don't yet know if it's a long-term trend.
You know, in a general sense, I think you have to regard the population as being in some jeopardy for all kinds of reasons.
The same reasons, in fact, that threaten Puget Sound's orcas: pollution, lack of food, stress from boat traffic. Scientists say these declining populations need every individual, and that alone justifies the big effort to save Springer.
The status of the population at large is such that every female that's able to contribute to the future of the population is important. So just at the level of population status and biology, I suppose you can say that she has real significance.
Springer's fame is also bringing more tourists to northern Vancouver Island. When her story went international, it put the tiny town of Telegraph Cove on the map. Jim Barrowman charters whale watching trips out of there.
The whole North Island probably will benefit for many, many years. For people that will want to keep coming back and seeing where this little whale lives. It spends a lot of its life.
We're off.
Yes! After her exciting dash to freedom in July, Springer needed time to learn the ways of the wild again. And it took time for Springer's pod to accept her. But now scientists believe she's right on track.
There she is in the back.
You know, she's right in among them. And whenever we see her, she looks comfortable, she looks functional. I think all together we feel that she's part of the larger group now.
But Springer still faces one major hurdle.
I think if she makes it through this winter and we find her again with any group next year, I think that will, at that point, we can call it a success.
During the winter, the orcas split into smaller family groups and leave Vancouver Island. Just where they go is still a mystery.
When animals have died from the group, it's taken place during that period of time of 4, 5, 6 months when we don't see them. So we suspect things might be tough during the winter.
No doubt then there's going to be some anxious moments next summer as Ford, Spong, and others watch for Springer's return.
You know, we'll be looking very carefully and hard for her right away. If we see her in there, then I think we'll all be very elated. If we don't, of course, I think, you know, we'd clearly be saddened by that fact, but nonetheless, I think feeling that at least, you know, we gave her a second chance, really.
I think you need to acknowledge that this was a wonderful humanitarian gesture. So many diverse groups came together. People who usually don't even talk to each other or are on such opposite sides of issues, actually coming together in a genuine spirit of trying to help. So that was terrific. You know, these are pretty dark days, and it's wonderful to have a little light in some corners.
Generally, orcas are kind of an icon on this coast. They're, I think, a symbol of the wild west coast, and I think society generally in this part of the world has come to care for these animals very strongly, very deeply. And through perhaps this concern and care for Springer, that will rub off on people generally who to take whatever other steps are needed to ensure that the whole population thrives for the future.
In the end, the effort to save Springer may actually say more about us than anything else. In many ways, it shows the best of what we as a species can achieve, especially when it comes to sharing our planet respectfully with others. From northern Vancouver Island, I'm Penny Legate. Thanks for watching.